Hello students, welcome back to ANI201. So in this video I'm going to show you, well in this series of videos, let me correct myself because I don't think you want to watch a 2-hour video straight, because that's about how long it took me to make this. So in this series of videos I will show you how to make this tutorial and what exactly this right here is explaining. And I'm going to break it up into parts. In this part we're going to just make the composition, create a background, and create the grid. We're going to do that, okay? We're going to get up through that part in this video. So if you're not having trouble with that, move on to the next video. So let me first show you what my finished product looks like. So I'll hit play, and there it goes. And that's how it winds up looking. That's our 10-second animation. And there it goes, it starts and playing again. So what is in this project is a lot of different stuff. As we can see, I've locked a lot of layers, but there are many sort of other compositions. You see, like there's a composition, there's a composition, there's a composition, there's a composition, there's a composition. I've got a bunch of different compositions outside of my main comp here, which has everything. So we will go over that when it comes into play. There's also a bunch of parenting here. Now, there's only 2 things parented right here, but there's other stuff as well. So let me first start off, and let's just start this off from scratch, starting a new thing. So let me go to File, New Project, and I'll make a new composition. Now, in this composition, let's see here, it wants it to be 1280, 720, 30 frames a second. This is actually important, and I screwed up originally when I made the big project. I actually had it at like 24 frames a second for some reason, and that made some of the math screw up there because I was moving in 5-second increments when there was not, 5 seconds available, basically. So we've got 30 frames a second, okay? And it's going to be only 10 seconds long, so 0 hours, 0 minutes, 10 seconds, 0 frames, and I'll make a thing like that. And I'll just name this, for the sake of argument here, I'm going to name this my main composition, okay? Because this is where I'm going to put everything. So I'm going to make a main composition. Basically, a pre-comp is, Basically, a pre-comp is a scene, and this right here is going to be our movie. Now I'm going to fit this up here so it actually fits on the stage. So that's our composition. And also we need to import the images from the ink splatter. Now I could just click and drag things over, but let me just go over here, right click, import file, multiple files, and I can go and find where my files are located. Well, I know I need the printer, and I know I need the ink splatter, and I will grab those. And cancel, there we go. So I can have myself, there we go. Matter of fact, I can also just have a new folder, and I can just have, an images folder. And I can put these 2 guys in my images folder. Boom, there we go. I can also, let me make myself a new folder here. Why not? Let me make a pre-comps folder so that I can put all my pre-comps in one area as well. So I'll have pre-comps, images, and yes, this is going in reverse alphabetical order. So sorry about that. So here's what we're going to do. We've got ourselves our blank thing. By the way, if you don't see any of this, go to Workspace, go to Default. You might have to right-click over here and add some columns. Like I added I believe I went and added modes. I believe I had to do that because originally you might just have this and not have the mode thing available. We will be going into blending modes in this, so put the modes on. Just simply right-click this area up here, and you can add that to your things that you can quickly, easily access in the timeline. So there's that. Now then, we're going to create a background. Now, whenever it says Command, for those of you on PC, the answer is Control, not Command. So create a new solid. I mean, obviously, I could just go and right-click and say New Solid, or I can go up to this menu up here and layer new solid, but I'll just do the Command Y. Anyway, it's going to bring this up. So I got myself a deep magenta solid right now. I'm going to get this at the actual width of the make comp size. Boom. There's a button right there that makes it comp size. So it's 1280 by 720. And by any chance, if you wind up screwing up and saying, oh no, let me just make this magenta, you can always click on the layer you're on, hold Shift Command Y, and it will go and change we can go back and change these settings. So let's go in and I can go and say, let me make this like a light gray? Yeah, like a light gray, why not? Gray solid, boom. There we go. I now have myself a gray background. And a matter of fact, let me just go and rename this. I'm right-clicking, and I'm going to rename this BG for background. There we go. I've got a background. So let's see here. So label BG for background, then add, generate, effect, gradial ramp. Okay, so what does that mean? So over in this right-hand side, once again, if you don't see this right-hand side, it's under Workspace Default. And we've got ourselves info, audio, like info, audio, preview. Let me go to effects and presets. So under effects and presets, we've got all these different things. And under generate, there is, was it generate? Yes, generate. There's a thing called gradial ramp. And I can just click, and I can drag the gradial ramp on the file, on the layer, or I can just drag it on top of the thing right over here. But let's just be nice and make sure we're putting it specifically on this one layer. This won't matter right now because there literally is one layer. But in the future, when you have multiple layers, make sure you're clicking and dragging it on the correct thing. Boom. And now you'll see up here on the left-hand side, I have a new window pop up. I have my effects control for this effect that I just put on it. I can go and click this to go back to the project. I can go back to the effects control here. Now, just to prove a point, I'm just going to make a solid shape right here. That's a mask. I did not want to make a mask. I wanted to be off of that. Okay. Let me lock you so that now I'm making a new layer. Fine, I'll just do it this way. Just make a new solid. And I'll make this one red, why not? And I will make this guy, I don't know, 50 by 50, just to prove a point. So there we go, I've got myself my red dot right over here. And on my red dot, you'll see there is no effects control for the red solid. But if I click my background, oh, because my background is currently locked, that's why. There we go, I still have the effects right there. So the effect is literally only on this background. Let me delete this red solid. So, basically, by the way, if you ever double-click something by accident, it'll bring up this menu. It'll literally show you only the layer you want. So always go back and make sure you're in your composition in the viewer. Unless if you want to only see one thing, which we will eventually. So, we're going to switch this from linear to radial. It's going to make a circle. And then I'm also going to change the start of the ramp. So I can just, maybe put the start of the ramping over here. There we go. So now it's a circle going from black to white. And let's just switch this. I'm going to make this guy a white color, which is the start color right over there. And I'm going to make this guy, that's a good enough. There we go. Now it's got a nice sort of subtle grayness. Actually, let me just make it a little bit more. Make it a little more defined just for the sake of argument here. There we go. So we see from the white down to the gray over there how it's doing that. And you know what? I can also say, swap the colors, make it go from gray to white, but I'm going to keep it from white to gray. There. And that's, set the colors and adjust points to create a gradual ramp. So that's generally what I've done. I've made a gradual color from white to gray. And just for the sake of argument, let me lock this layer so we don't have to worry about clicking on it anymore, because that layer is staying where it is. Now then, to create a grid background, let's create another solid layer. So once again, Command Y, or in the case of you guys on PC, Control Y. And you know what? I will go and make it this background color. That's a little eyedropper, and you can just go and drag around and find any color that's currently on the screen, and it'll pick it up. I'll just grab that color, and I'll make it the same composition size. Boom. So now I've got a pale gray color, so on and so forth, right on top of it. Now you'll notice that it's currently overlapping on top of my gradient, and I can't see it because whatever is above on the timeline will hide what's below. See, if I get rid of the eyeglass, I see it, now I don't, now I see it, now I don't. So let me rename this. Let me rename this guy to grid. Okay? So I know this is going to be my grid layer. And I'm going to Effect, Generate Grid. So let me go to Effects, and I'm on Generate, and there's Grid. Let me just go and click and drag it on the grid. Boom, there's the grid. Now I have a grid pattern on this. And this grid will be, you know what, I don't like the 5 there, so let me just put it at 1. There we go, thinner lines. I kind of like that. It's less obstruction. But once again, you know, you guys can change these settings to however you really want to feel. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing here. I'm also going to go with the width slider here because that'll make it squares instead of rectangles. And you know what, I could make it really big, but you know what, I did like the way it was before at 32, so I'll just do 32 there. So yeah, and you know, blending mode, if I want to make it, you know, screen, it'll screen. If I want to make it hard light, it'll hard light. I'm going to just go back to none and just leave it as is like that. So, now I've got myself a grid with like a little glare effect, so it's lighter here and darker over here. And it just says grid. In order to add an ellipse mask to the layer, you must first pre-compose the layer and move it to a new composition. So, what does that mean? So, right now we only have a grand total of 2 layers in our timeline. Let me tell you something. This will get very big with the number of layers very quickly. And that will be the case in any sort of professional work that you would ever do in After Effects. There will be hundreds of layers. So, has anyone ever had the problem of clicking on something and going, no, wait, I didn't mean to click on that. Darn it, now I just moved it. What did I move? What did I touch? So, pre-compositions are basically windows into other scenes, into other projects. You can essentially put a project inside a project. And whatever changes you make to that original scene will also appear in the project that has the scene in it. So, this is our movie that we're making right now. And we're going to just off-put some stuff only as separate scenes. And this big movie will only be referencing those scenes, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is there's multiple ways I can do this. I can right-click and go to Pre-Compose. I can also go and find where Pre-Compose is in the, should be Export? No, it's not Export. Composition Settings, maybe? One moment, I can find where it is in the menu by just doing this. Pre-compose. It's under Layer. Okay. So it's under Layer, and I can do Pre-compose, but I'm just going to right-click and go to Pre-compose here. And I can make a new layer. And I can leave all attributes in the main copy. I can move all attributes to a new composition. I'm just going to leave it right there, attributes in this. And I'm going to name this guy Grid Comp. Okay? So, okay, cool. Now you'll see that I have myself, this is now turned gray. This has now turned gray. What the heck does that mean? Well, it's a yellowy gray. This yellowy gray means it's a composition. This red means it's a solid. You know, the different colors are for different types of, if I had any audio files in here, the audio file would be a different color bar going across as well. So, stuff like that. So, anyway, if I go back to project here now, you'll see that I have myself my main composition, and I have my grid composition. I'm going to just move my grid into my pre-comps, which I just realized I misspelled, so let me just go put an E in pre-comps. There we go. So now I've got my folder, and there's my pre-comp. If I double-click it, okay, fine. If I go and double-click this, there we go. I somehow must have double-clicked in the wrong spot. But I've got myself my main composition now, and right next to it I have my grid composition. And this is literally all my grid composition is. It's literally just this gray page. But because it's now essentially a movie file, it's not really a movie file, but just in this metaphor of us being a film, this is a scene. It's a finished reel of a movie. And this is the entire movie. But because it's now essentially a pre-comp, I can use this as a window of sorts into it. So if I just simply click on my grid, go to a, yes, I hear you, meow, I will be with you in a moment. And I go and draw a shape. So for example, if I draw a circle, you'll see that what's happening is I've added a mask on top of that lid, on top of that grid. And I can just switch it to subtract and excuse me, why are we not? And this is what happened last time as well. Well, but let me just undo, delete the mask. Let me just... So I'm on my grid layer. Let me go and make myself a circle of some dimensions. And in theory, this is now a window that I can see behind stuff. I'm in my main composition. I know this. Did I do this in reverse again? I have the feeling I did this in reverse. Because in theory, right here, this should now be showcasing. This should now be essentially being a window to see behind. And like there's the dimensions of the window, what could be inside versus what can be outside. So what's a wall and what's a window? So, let me see, what did I do? Invert? No, invert's not doing it. Is this the situation where effects controls? None. Main comp. Let me remove the effects here. Okay, cool. So that was it. The effects was somehow screwing up with the mask. Because there is now my grid. There's my grid. Well, there it is. There's no grid on it, but there's my grid. So, something was happening with my grid. So let me just remove this entirely. Let me switch this from add to subtract. So now, in theory, I have a window behind this, which... Take a look at this real quick. Yes, I have myself a window right over there of the grid where nothing else is. So, I now have myself a window. Now let me try to add a grid onto this. Okay. Let me see if let me undo that. Let me go into the grid composition. Let me add the grid onto this guy. Slider width there, boom. Let me make this a 1, boom. Okay, cool. So I'm doing this, I'm putting my effect on my grid composition. Let me go back to my main comp now. Aha! Yep. So instead of subtract, I wanted add. There we go. That's how that works. Okay, cool. So I did this slightly out of order. So let me go and do this again. Just for the sake of argument, let me just start that entire part over just to showcase exactly how it's going to be. So let me just delete grid composition. So the order of how you do this is going to be what messes this up. And as you can see, there are going to be situations where things will be messed up. And it's just a matter of figuring out what it is that happened. So let me go in, make myself a new layer, which is Command Y. Let me make the pale solid gray layer. Boom. There we go. I'm going to rename this guy Grid. Okay. Now, before I add any effects or masks, I'm going to make this a pre-composition. Okay. I'm going to pre-compose this before I do anything weird to it. So there we go. And I'll just name this, yeah, sure, Grid Comp 1. Why not? Add you in my pre-comp folder. There we go. Let me double click you, get to you like that. So let me now go add my grid to my pre-comp, and it might not look like it. It's going to look completely white here, but it's okay. Trust the fact that it's actually doing what it says it's going to do. So there, I'm going to switch to slider width. Going to switch that to 1 for a border. There we go. Going to go back to my main comp, and as you see, it is in fact still doing what I tell it to do. Now I can go to my shape layer, and I can make myself a mask. And there's my mask. I had to put the mask on the main comp, but I had to put the grid effect in the pre-comp on the grid in order to get this effect. And that's how we wind up making this background. Now then, I can also obviously change stuff about the mask. I can change the feathering, make it a little blurry, maybe a bit like that. There we go. Have it kind of transition out. I can also change the mask shape, and I can, just maybe, here, cancel. I could probably just click and drag these guys over here and move it independently as well if I really wanted to, maybe put it up a bit more. Matter of fact, I should probably, instead of doing that, probably just click each guy individually, holding the command button to boop, grab all those guys. Oh, actually, no. Hold the shift button to grab all those guys. And then I'll use shift and the arrow keys to just move it around, and that looks generally about where I want it to be. And there we go. I've got myself a background that has a white to gray gradient transition and has a tile background in this one viewing window. So that's step 1. That is all basically, let me lock this layer before I do anything crazy and change anything. So that's basically 1, 2, these 3 parts right here, just making stuff like that. Now the next bit is I'm going to create the colored boxes, and I'll start that process, and in another video I will basically try to get the colored boxes all the way through to the adding some basic text to follow the boxes. Yeah, I'll try to get all of that in the next video. So, thank you very much. Hopefully this was okay. As you can see, there are some things you have to do in a specific order to make it work. So I'm just going to hit Command S for save. And let me just go and say this is week 2 video example, because I already have a week 2 homework that I already did originally. So let me just hit save here. And there we go. And I will see you guys in the next video.